Breaking news now. Can anything be inferred about Putin's plans for Africa from his promises? Many countries felt the effects of Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. Putin's political actions since then, however, suggest more ambitious plans to build alliances. The supply chains were immediately and drastically affected by the invasion of Ukraine. Rapid Western sanctions against Russian companies, including state-owned fuel suppliers, drove up energy prices across Europe and fueled sky-high inflation, prompting a mass exodus of Western firms from Russia and forcing Russian businesses to look elsewhere for their supply needs. The war has disrupted global supply chains and strained geopolitical relationships. Consider grain as an example. Crop exports from Ukraine were significant worldwide. Russia blocked access to Black Sea ports until a grain deal could be negotiated, significantly weakening the country's economy. Ukraine has been forced to export much of its produce via the slower, and more expensive, Danube route because Russia has been bombing Ukraine's grain stores on the coast since the Black Sea Grain Initiative ended. Russia has indirectly increased food prices in the Middle East and Africa by preventing the export of 20 million metric tons of grain. Russia's ambivalent relationship with Africa has been further complicated by these actions. Despite mounting food shortages, Russia's president appears eager to strengthen ties with African nations, where the Soviet Union's role in helping to oust colonial European powers is still remembered and where talk of rebalancing global power away from the Europe-US axis finds a receptive audience. To counter neocolonialism, the practice of applying illegitimate sanctions, and attempts to undermine traditional moral values, Putin has advocated for a multipolar world. To compensate for the loss of European markets, Russia supports including Ethiopia and Egypt in a broader BRICS grouping and has pushed for closer commercial ties within Africa. In 2022, Russia reportedly sent $4.7 billion worth of food to African countries through exports. Bilateral trade reached $18 billion, an increase of 35% from the first half of 2023. Rosatom, a Russian state-owned nuclear power company, is providing Egypt with a $25 billion loan to fund the construction of a nuclear power plant. Putin has made amends for the damage he has done in Africa by forcing up food prices. Putin said in July at a Russia-Africa summit in St. Petersburg that his country was prepared to give away between 25,000 and 50,000 tons of grain to Burkina Faso, Zimbabwe, Mali, Somalia, the Central African Republic, and Eritrea in the coming months. However, this has its limits. Russian withdrawal from the Black Sea Grain Initiative has been described as a stab in the back for African countries by the Kenyan government. Alex Vines, an expert on Africa at Chatham House, says that while the direct trade and financial links of Africa with Russia are small, the war has damaged the continent's economies through higher commodity prices, as well as higher food, fuel, and headline inflation. The economic effects of Russia's actions cannot be countered by high-minded talk of multipolarity. Russia has been actively courting Africa, but it has done so while keeping an eye on China, which could be a major ally in a future world order. China's exports to Russia increased by 67.2% in the first half of 2023, a sign of the country's support for Russia since the beginning of the war in Ukraine. Russia and China's bilateral trade jumped 40.7% year-over-year to $93.8 billion. Russian Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin has predicted that bilateral trade will top $200 billion in 2018. China has also helped Russia in the energy industry. China's expenditures on Russian oil, coal, and LNG imports increased to approximately $81 billion in 2022 from $52.1 billion the previous year. Despite claims that there are no limits to China's support for Russia, Beijing has not yet signed an agreement to open the Power of Siberia 2 gas pipeline, which would transport fuel to China. Nor has it provided Russia with the promised weapons. However, China is likely cautious about pushing Western countries, still its most important trade partners, too far, despite supplying £500 million worth of high-tech, dual-use, microelectronics to Russia since the implementation of sanctions. As a result of their involvement with the Wagner mercenary group, the United States sanctioned a Chinese space technology organization, and the state-affiliated telecoms giant Huawei has cut off some services and technology to Russia. Overall, Russia is making the right moves, but any enthusiasm appears to be lukewarm at best, given the strategic messiness and operational brutality of its invasion of Ukraine.